can officially start our summer now, which is about a month long here in Islanders country. Now that we've got some news from Lou Lamoriello earlier this week, John Zella, James Nichols here with you as always. I think we need to start the show with something that's been contentious, we'll say, with Kadri, and on a number of levels. I think we should start with the reporting of it all
Sure.
and how people think that that was handled. And I think we have some responsibility in that, as individual writers, and you know what I mean. Like it was hard to sift through that. I don't want to like pat myself on the back. I was skeptical the whole time. I just wasn't sure,
Yeah.
especially after the Saravalli DFO rundown thing came out. That was like the first thing I texted you. I was like, okay, something's not right here. Everyone else is saying one thing. He's the only one saying different. So wait, he's either right or crazy, or got bad info. But I think we do have some responsibility, and it sucks. I don't think we want to be this wrong. Everybody was this a certain amount of wrong or whatever. So I think just kind of coming out and just being like, we all kind of share a responsibility with this.
Yeah. No, you're right. I don't. Wrong is a tough term for me.
Yeah, I don't think it's just not the way that it shook out, and
Right.
it
Which
was
happens.
difficult. It's everyone having the wrong information is, or
Again, I hear
it's
what you're
not. Yeah,
saying.
it's not wrong. I think everyone having the information they had and it turning out to just not have happened that way is
Yeah.
difficult to swallow. I think a little bit of the problem and what I thought I wanted to do at the start of the show is no one else that was putting this information out is coming out and being like, "Oops, sorry. Like here's what
Correct.
actually happened." Everyone's staying quiet, and that's irresponsible. Saravalli's didn't come out. No one's talking about, and I don't mean to call people out specifically,
No.
especially because actually he's probably the one person that doesn't need to be called out. But there's no one to rake. It's just tough. And there's no one's really offering much in the way of an explanation. I think that's where half the problem is.
There's no explanation, but it's not hard to piece together what happened. Right.
I
You
think,
look
and
at
that's
this.
worth discussing, and that's part of going into
Yeah.
it. So feel free to do that.
Yeah. I mean, you look at the situation as a whole, right? They swung and missed on Gaudreau, and then the attention turned right to Kadri, and the whole time leading up until about a week before, which was about a month. Um, there was an agreement in place with Lamorello and Kadri. It's just the nature of the way Lamorello does business, right? And this is one of those times where, and we know his motto: when you have time, you use it. This is one of those times where it backfired on him because, he had that deal in place with Kadri, handshake, and in order for the Islanders to fit that into their, plans, they had to move some money out, and that didn't happen fast enough for the liking of Kadri, probably his camp as well. Because there's things to consider here. He's a 32-year-old free agent who was, well into August unsigned, quote unquote. You know, it's not like the offers were coming in all directions. So
There
now,
was only so many teams that could make it work, and
right.
Calgary was always in that conversation.
Calgary was in the
It
conversation.
it may not have made it to Islanders circles, but it would definitely, for those digging into it. And everyone has different, like, how invested they are in researching where possible players could go. Um, but I think those in Islanders circles they weren't necessarily considering that, and with what Calgary lost, even what they
Right.
had to give up to fit him in, it was significant to like make that happen. It wasn't like they weren't a they weren't an option until they lost those players. Then all of a sudden it was
Right.
okay. We need somebody.
Right, and that's the thing, right? You look at how everything really unfolded, and it wasn't until a week before where Calgary was assessing the situation the whole time, but it wasn't until a week before that they jumped in. Right, Colorado had an offer on the table. I think it was like 4 years. I don't really know the money on that, just the term. The Islanders offered that 7 by 7, and when things got out there on what the Islanders offered by, you know, my boss David Pagnotta, John Shannon, Frank Saravalli, Jason Greger, like um, all of these insiders, which you and I are not claiming to be.
Oh,
Um,
I mean, I couldn't personally be further. I have no information ever.
yeah, and that's the thing, right? Like, I get I get information. I have information on things now that I'm sure as shit not going to be sharing. Um, but we get information, and again, we're not claiming to be insiders, and we take a page out of Elliot Freeman's notebook and we tell you what we're hearing, which is again not necessarily the truth, right? That's his favorite line, and we're gonna
Absolutely.
borrow it.
I think
The
the
thing
thing
that
is
the thing
too
that
is
happens the thing that happened here is that Lamorello ran out of time. Kadri didn't want to wait anymore. Calgary swooped in with the same deal. We can
I
make it
think it's
work,
fair.
and we're willing to move the first round pick and to offload Sean Monahan. We know the Islanders aren't. We'll take the term. We'll take the structure. You play here. People forget Nazem Kadri turned down a trade to Calgary from the when he was with the Maple Leafs.
There was a reason for that in particular. I can't remember. It turned out not to be what people thought. Like he didn't want to go to Calgary. I mean,
Mhm.
obviously that's not the case. But offhand, I can't remember. I think we
Regardless,
just I think it's I just wanted to make sure that we point out like where information like on this show and like I certainly don't tweet or write anything about it, but that's more on your on your side of things as far as the two of us is concerned. But it's information getting passed along, right? Like we are on the same boat in terms of like actual personal sources, right? Like I
right,
think that's where that's where I wanted to be more clear is like our job on this podcast and really in most of our writing is just passing along any information that we get. And
right, and
and
now
so I think that's where that's just something a line that I wanted to make sure that was being drawn.
no, for
And that's
sure,
what a
and
lot of people were doing. And whether you're the primary source on that information where someone that is trustworthy and connected tells you, or you get it through somebody else that you trust, I'm third or fourth removed from that. But if you're second removed, maybe in your position, um, you're kind of trusting where the information is coming from. So I think that's where it's complicated and it puts people in a difficult position at the end of the day because I think we were all disappointed. It was a big swerve.
yeah, no,
As
I hear you,
as
and
soon
that's
as as soon as Shayna tweeted that, I texted you and Joe
I
and I
knew it
said,
right away.
"Here's the swerve, man. Like it's
Yeah.
I just had a feeling." And then it was a few hours later.
No,
Um,
yeah, I spoke to Shayna right before, uh, and I had she's a friend of ours now. I think we can say I've had a couple of conversations with her, and I was like, are people gonna love us or hate us right now? And meaning, the me and Dave and some of other people. And she was like, she texted me this funny face, emoji face. I was like, oh, that's it.
yeah,
So yeah, no, it was a definite swerve last minute, and that's the
any
thing though.
news
The
getting
reason
out meant it wasn't the Islanders. Anything even remotely being leaked, even if no one was going to say it, meant that it wasn't the Islanders.
and that's the funny thing about when, like, earlier you said we were quote unquote wrong, and the reason why I said wrong is hard for me is because uh to be wrong means that there was no truth to it at all, right? But
I
there
I I,
was.
I think
and
that's I
and
think that's fair.
timing, yeah, timing is the factor here. Things didn't happen fast enough for the liking of the Kadri camp, and that's why things changed.
All right, that's a good. I like that as a conclusion to that. And I didn't mean to be long-winded. And it's like the least sexy thing to start the show. So if you're just tuning back in after you've hit the 30-second fast forward button, welcome to the show. Um, but in all seriousness, I think just talking about Kadri, I think the question here, and at this point, we're a few days removed from this actually happening and all of that. So you may have heard answers, but if you're interested in an hour take, I'll ask it for you, James. Is it better in the long term that Kadri is not on the team? Would it have required? Is there some truth to what Lamoriello is saying? In other words, that it would have required too much going out. It would have made the situation uncomfortable as far as the roster was concerned, even if it meant some moderate success in 2 or 3 years. Or even would it have not worked? Like would messing with some of the chemistry there and not just truly adding a winger is that the better option? And if it's not that, don't do anything.
It's tough for me to say that they, a lot of the takes are they dodged a bullet because it was 7-by-7. He's 32 years old, and that's a lot to give for an aging center coming off a career year, which all of that is valid. However, you look at the meat of that contract. Let's just say that's years 1 through 4. He was probably going to make the Islanders a better team in years 1 through at least 3. Let's say
I
let's give it
still
let's give it 3 years.
I still maintain that messing with moving players around and who's a
Well, and
center and
now
who's this that it never sat well with me. And I'm not even saying that in hindsight because it didn't happen. Even with someone else was on the show, I said that a number of times. It could have been with Mitch or Joe or something. It never sat well
yeah.
with me.
No, I
I
hear
didn't
that.
I didn't I didn't think that would be a clean affair,
I
especially if
hear
you're
that.
moving out true wingers and then moving a center to wing. It never was right.
The other side to that, though, is now we don't know what the corresponding moves would have been because, the talk was a lot of it's going to be Josh Bailey. He's the outlier, $5 million, no trade protection. But there was also the murmurs of is it going to be JG Pajot? Is it possible that there's something there for going back to Vancouver in a JT Miller deal?
And
Whatever,
that was
whatever the
more of
case is.
that was my own speculation for whatever
Sure,
it's worth.
and
Simply
listen,
because it was a deal. It was somebody with no trade protection, and
right.
it would have hurt, but it would have moved the team in the direction that you're really kind of hoping
Right.
the team
So,
goes.
the thing is, did they dodge a bullet? I wouldn't put it that way. I would say the first, couple of years, Kadri would have helped. However, that would have worked out. And in the later years, this is something I've said in the past. Look, as of right now, the Islanders only have 3 guys who are going to be under contract by the 4th year of that Kadri deal.
Well,
You know,
now
you,
now Romanov and Dobson likely.
not even, not even
Oh,
because they have 3.
3 years.
So there's still only 3 guys by the 4th year of that Kadri deal who will be on the Islander team. Um, so
That's fair.
it's hard to say that they dodged the bullet here. It's more, in my opinion, that they didn't close the door on an impact guy. However, I will say that the thought process here, and I don't know for a fact if this is something that was going through the mind of Lamoriello, but part of the thought process I think was, am I going to trade another first round pick for the 4th year in a row just to trade Bailey as well?
Can
Not have a first round pick going into the deadline if we're in the thick of it and need, that asset to acquire a big name who's going to be available then. And I hold your sarcasm. I understand. Oh, he didn't do it now. Why would he do it? We've seen him do it before. He did it with
if
Palmieri. He did it
if
with Pajot. The
if
trade
there's any
deadline is
solace in this, it's that at the trade deadline, if they're in the
yeah,
mix, now there's a little bit of room, they accrue some cap, and you can kind of see where players are. Maybe I don't know. I'm kind of done speculating on that
sure.
front. I'm in analysis mode because it's exhausting. Even somebody last night on the Twitter space with Hockey DB was talking about Pasternak, and I'm like, I am not interested in that. I'm not interested in. I frankly this season is my vow. We will not talk about Barzal on the show other than his current play, unless he's signing a contract or he's explicitly said he's not signing we are not discussing that. It's exhausting. I
Yeah.
want to talk about this team. I want to analyze the stuff. That's why I want to get through this at the top of the show and kind of just discuss it. And I think I even said that in the tweet today. We were moving on. We're going to talk about it, and then that's it. It's to bed. Kadri's name, unless they're playing the Islanders, will not be mentioned. Any of this, we're done. It's exhausting. We're already a defeatist fan base, so to kind of go on top of that and like really just knock yourself over the head with it over and over, especially in our shoes, and then listen, like on a lot of levels, I'm just kind of time to move on. I wrote about it. I published something today with the hockey writers. It was just, okay, the first half, you have to evaluate this a little bit. What did Lamoriello say? And then let's move on. I think I want to address two things. One is something that you mentioned in trading Bailey and attaching a first round pick or whatever you needed to do, or Bavillier in a first, which really would have hurt. My issue is that they could have received some, and I said this last night too. So some of you might be hearing this twice. My issue is that the trade deadline, they could have traded a Bailey and received something back, a second round pick or whatever, and then had that asset to at least figure something out and package together. Or the money would have just been off the books. You didn't need to do it. So instead of it gaining you assets, you had to package it and give something away. So you weren't just losing a roster player, you were losing assets on top of it. That's poor judgment. That was my longer piece that I wrote last week. All of this is simply poor judgment on Lamoriello's part. That's kind of my issue. Did he do, quote, some tidy work with Dobson and Romanov? Has he kind of done that with a lot of his players, especially on defense? Absolutely. I think that's the one area where you can kind of trust him to do that. Again, another reason why the Barzal thing, at least on face value, isn't that much of an issue to me. I'm more confident in something like that happening just because it seems like he does it. It seems like he figures it out. My issue on the judgment is on the trading and signing front, either overpaying or simply not doing it. I'm not talking about trading Varlamov. I'm not even talking about Andy Green or Clutterbuck or Chara. If you're going to move players, talk about hockey trades, you didn't need to do player for player. You could have just gotten the money off the books. If you saw it coming, we all saw it coming. We all knew what needed to happen. They needed $5 million off the books one way or another. We knew that that would have left today as it stands. There's $2.2 million. Granted, Robin Sala moves up with $800K, blah, blah, blah. Around $2.2 million. You needed 7. You needed 7 for a guy. There it was. You had that opportunity at the trade. That's what's irking me more than the inability now. You knew this the entire time. And on top of that, sorry about this rant. On top of that, there's for him to kind of talk out of both sides of his mouth is also where, so he saved himself. I also wrote about that. He prepared the fan base for this. Oh, well, yeah, I know we need to make some moves and get better on offense, but we also need our veterans to be better. Okay. The veterans that need to be better should be the ones that need to be traded one way or another, even if it's for a 3rd round pick. The fact that it was going to cost you something and you couldn't see that, and then to say both of those things, we need to really evaluate this roster. Nothing happened between then and now. What do you mean you feel good about it all of a sudden? There's nothing. What happened? You play pickup hockey over the summer? Brock Nelson in the beauty league and Kieffer Bellows in the beauty league. Oh, well, yeah, we're really excited about this. Give Kieffer Bellows $1.2 million. Yet another redundancy on that roster for $1 million or more. We kept saying, Paul Stastny or this guy. Oh, we don't need another 20 goal scorer. And then we're like, oh yeah, the Bellows deal for a year, that's not a big deal. He offers, based on past performance, nothing. Offers nothing. At least Stastny scored 20 goals last year. All right, you don't need another 20 goal scorer? Yeah, you do. You didn't get the other one, so you may as well spread it out. So then your veterans can step up, and then you got somebody else to push them too. That's some of the analysis on this, and again, the judgment by Lamoriello, and then seeing and reading some other stuff. It's very confusing to me. I don't understand. So you have 2 nice pieces of business there in Romanov and Dobson, and then you just have Bellows taking up space. Call somebody up on a 2-way. It had to be Bellows. Had to add the money. Nuts. That to me is, I don't see the value there.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of there's a lot of betting on themselves again. And you heard it in Dobson's comments in his presser after he signed his deal, tight knit, the things you always hear. Tight knit, we love the group. It's special in here, yada yada. You hear that a lot. And
There's something to that. I think
there
that's
is something to
important.
that. There is. But like I said, by Lamorello, there's a lot of betting on what he's got already again. And maybe the outlook is this. Last season we were hit by a plethora of obstacles, and I know that's a overused excuse at this point. I don't know if I really buy that because it's not really an excuse. It's what happened, and I know we've said it a lot, but we've
You can
also
not like it.
haven't. You could not like it, but there hasn't been another season yet to prove otherwise yet, right? It hasn't happened yet. So the thought process here, that which I'm wondering, and this is what I'm putting together in my head, is they got healthy. They started to look a little bit more like themselves. Now, the 2 seasons prior, the forward group that got to the Eastern Conference Final was mostly the same. What was the major difference in last season was the blue line and their inability to push play because of, you know, a Zdeno Chara who's 45 years old and
I mean,
Andy
push
Green who's
play, just
39 years old.
control their own end.
Right.
Chara was getting walked.
So, now the Islanders add Romanov, who's 22 and has, he's a really great skater. He's not excellent in puck transition, not
And
excellent by any means.
he said this offseason that he's been working on that.
Yeah, he did, and that's, you hope that that's something that he said with confidence. Like, I know I wasn't good at that, and I'm pretty sure I'm bang on. I got better. And he, I actually thoroughly enjoyed listening to him in the press conference. He is gonna, I can tell, be one of those fan favorites. Glue guys in the room. People are gonna love this guy. Um, he said he was like, I'm ready to play. I'm ready to play right now. Like
Yeah,
if we
he
were,
said he was friends with Sorokin. Like that was
yeah,
cool. Like he, I'll give Lamorello this. He seems to choose players that are good in the room, that
right,
work with the current chemistry and really do add value. So when you're thinking about his signings over the last few years and players he has brought into the room, all of them have been really specific, right? And they have added value even if we don't see it. Even if the analytics don't necessarily, even if the eye test rather doesn't necessarily prove that, um, or they're a little inconsistent, at least in the room, they seem to be building something.
right. And I hear all that, and this is what I think the major difference is between last season, or last summer and this summer, is that look at the signings from last summer. The only signings, and you can't even count it for this summer, that are quote unquote veterans is Parise and Clutterbuck, who he extended at the deadlines. This summer was about youth. After the fact that they lost out on Gaudreau, after the fact that they lost out on Kadri, it was about youth. He kept Dobson and Romanov, 22 years old, signed them to 3 years. Bellows, I understand the hesitation there. Still just 24 years old. This is his last season to prove if he's got anything to offer. And then you saw today's signings, which was nothing to write home about. The couple of depth guys, one of them in which could be something if he figures it out. In Dennis Chalowski, how I'm not sure how to pronounce it.
Me either. That was like the first time I saw his name today.
So, but this guy, listen, former first round pick, the pick right before Kieffer Bellows actually, and he's one of those defensemen who the Islanders lacked last season. And I'm not saying he's going to be in the lineup, but he's that style of defenseman who he skates well in transition. He has good puck handling skills from the blue line. He's got the offensive prowess. His fault is that he's really bad in his own end. I think that somebody from the Detroit organization or the Washington organization, whichever, I forget who I read it from, said that he offers zero compete in his own end. He won't win puck battles, and that's an issue. You wonder if maybe that's something he could figure out in a well-structured Islander defense. Regardless, the mindset here, and in my opinion, from Lamorello, is our forward group got it done when we needed them to get it done. What we lacked last season was uh, urgency from the blue line, and he thinks he addressed it. He thinks that a lot of his, um, dominoes are going to fall this season, or all of his dominoes are going to fall this season. Where guys like Kyle Palmieri are going to be consistent this year, 25 goals, maybe 30. He's done it before. Anthony Beauvillier will take that step forward and be consistent. Oliver Wahlstrom will figure out, his game. Maybe he'll pot 20. He said in his press conference, Mathew Barzal is going to lead this team. He's going to take that next step. Okay, hopefully he's right.
Yeah, I think with
And
in
what does
terms
that
of
mean?
the in terms of
Hold
the
on.
offense, yeah, sorry.
What does that mean for Mathew Barzal? What does that mean he's going to lead the offense? What does he have to do? He needs to score 85 points like he did in his rookie season. Is he going to be able to do that?
Yeah,
That's the
that's
question.
definitely it definitely is, and I think there's as Ethan Sears said it with the New York Post, it's a lot of maybes.
Yeah.
That resonated with me. I really like that. In fact, I quoted it in an article because uh, Kevin Kerr's kind of laid it out with a lot of questions, and then I just respond like the way that I laid it out is I just responded essentially with what Ethan had said, which was it's a lot of maybes, and that's a big bet, as you said. I think the offense can do it, and it was a bigger problem, I think. So I disagree with you a little bit there. It was a big problem last year because when you look at Varlamov's numbers, and I haven't necessarily been easy on him and kind of saying he needs to bounce back, and 10, 17, and 2, and some of his numbers compared to like the season before, even coming off an injury was a little tough. But I think when you look into some of the actual game stats, he was keeping them in 2-1, 3-2 games as it was, and they just couldn't score in front of him. And I think we even said that a few times. They're just not giving him the goal support. We said that pretty much all season. So it's not just okay. They let in 3 goals. They're only scoring one.
No,
Varlamov kept it at 3-1. So I think that's where the offense for sure. I understand what you're saying with everyone's got to find more consistent. Can everyone take those steps? It's just a really big maybe. And I think part of the fans' issue and perspective is they were 2 goals shy of making it to the Stanley Cup in a game 7 in the conference final. To simply just not address that and kind of roll the group back again that made it that far that clearly needed something else is an issue. Now, the fact that Wahlstrom is now 2 years older or a year, whatever it is, older, and could be a difference maker, I think is something that we have to make sure we don't overlook. Right? He wasn't that player 2 years ago in that game 7. Um, Everyone's 2 years older. The older players, yes, and blah blah blah. But yeah, if a Wallstrom and a Bavillier and whatever, if everyone could just wake up earlier in the season or at least keep it somewhat consistent, yeah, I mean, there is that possibility. It's a big maybe. It's a lot of big maybes. But Lee is coming back. He's going to have over a year now to have recovered from his injury. Varlamov's going to have a year coming off of his injury. Dobson's coming back, hopefully stronger, as he mentioned. Wallstrom also has that same opportunity. Everyone else should be hungry. They had their longest break in years at this point. They should be well rested and ready to go. They shouldn't, even Pulak, he's coming back now. He's had almost a year, if not a year, to come back and be fully healthy. This roster, even the fourth line, who was looking slow, they were a big part of the success. So maybe they can really bounce back. This is state for Cizikas really because he seems to have a motor that's just just
Yeah.
going to go until it doesn't.
Let me just jump in there real quick on the fourth line. And I hear all that. What you said, that's excellent points. Pulak he was a big miss last season. He went from 4 to 6 weeks to 11 to 12. That's how much time he
Would
missed, and he wasn't
really
himself when he
confusing.
came back. Was very confusing. He definitely wasn't himself until maybe 5, 6 games in. Which in the situation that was last season, that was crucial. They probably lost 4 out of 5 or 5 out of 6 of those games where he wasn't himself. But the fourth line, people forget, and listen, the criticism is justified on the fourth line. However, I think Cizikas is Still a fine player. I'm a big fan of Cal Clutterbuck. I think that he offers a lot. He was good last season. I think he was the only one that was good last season. Matt Martin is the outlier there. People still
I think that's
forget
right.
though. People still forget though that he played all of last season with an injury. And that was public information. That was stated, I think, by November, that Matt Martin is injured. He's not injured enough to be sidelined, but he will play the rest of the season with an injury. I'm curious to see, after one of the longest off seasons in recent history for the Islanders, how much he has recovered, how much the whole team has recovered, and what they'll look like coming out of the gate. I think that's a factor that we haven't spoken about, and I do think that there is something to say there regarding them being now well rested after two crazy seasons of, shortened summers and concentrated seasons where games were just so close together, little rest. Not advocating for the fact that they didn't add and get better, but I do think that they will be a good team still.
Yeah, I
And
mean, like I
the
said, we're dealing with what we have at this point. I don't. It's not. It's we've rehashed that they didn't add and this and that. So I don't even want to talk about after the season. To be honest, and that includes like obviously the Barzal situation. Um, I just want to deal with what we have. I don't want to think about, oh, they're going to be 2 years older and this at 2 years from now, and how long is their window. Let's look at this particular season. I think in this season, I'm also thinking about the rest of the division. I think Carolina got better. I don't know if the Rangers did. I don't know if much in the division did. I think there's kind of a mixed bag on analysis on that. I'm wondering what you think as far as, okay, the Islanders didn't necessarily get better on paper by adding players, but maybe they're going to get all their players back at 100%. And younger players are now older and more mature. Dobson, Wallstrom. You're going to have a Sal. You're going to have a Romanov. That's definitely a different look there. Um, Players are healthy, all of that. Thinking about that and in terms of the rest of the division, where do you think the Islanders fit in? Because I think Mike Rupp had them third or fourth in the division.
Yeah,
So it's
I'm good
interesting.
with fourth. I'm good with fourth. I think that that's okay. I don't think many teams in the division got that much better. I think everyone made changes. It just
Yes,
really depends on how those dominoes fall, right? Like the Rangers, for instance, they lose Cop and Strom, but they add Trocheck. Okay, is
huge
that
ad.
huge add? But losing those two guys and only adding Trocheck, because I don't think they made any other major additions there. They also
Halak,
lost Vetrano. Yeah, Halak, but that's not more firepower, right?
right.
Igor Shesterkin's going to start 60 games, maybe 65 games there, if barring injury. Um, but up front, they look mostly the same to me. They lost, I think, three key guys in Vetrano, Strom, and Cobb. I think that Cobb was a big part of their success after he was acquired. Um, so I feel they went lateral. Big ad in Trocheck. He's one of those players he'll put up points and he's kind of a jerk on the ice. You need that. Um,
Oh,
big
they needed
ad.
some veteran. I hate this. They needed some grit and a veteran presence on a
Yeah.
team that, I mean, he hasn't really had a lot of playoff success, but he's been around. So having a
Yeah.
little bit
So
of that, I think, won't hurt.
I think the Rangers went lateral. I think Carolina got better. They just added Statsny today. They got Brent Burns. They did add Pacioretty for free, but he's going to
He's
be
out
out
for
for
a bit.
6 months. We'll see how that works out for them down the line and when he comes back from injury and such. But I overall do think that they got better. Um, and then as for everyone else, look, like Columbus, obviously they got better. They got Johnny Gaudreau. Um, the Flyers lateral.
No,
The Devils
lateral. I
maybe
mean,
just lateral a year older. And that's
that's one of those
that's
things that
not the
the Islanders.
same. That's not the same as the Islanders though, because they're so young. So I think they're
Well,
a
my
year
point with the
older.
younger players, like the Wallstroms and the
Yes.
Dobsons, where they got older and
Yes.
developed, they had another year to do that.
Sure. So that
The
makes sense.
Devils were able to do that on the whole. They
And
did add
Washington,
some. Did they add not Palat? They added
yeah, they did. They had a lot.
yeah, they made some good moves. Their main the Devils' main issue is, and we should have Neil on, frankly, from our sister show on THPN with the Devils. But their problem was goaltending. A huge problem was goaltending.
Yeah,
Now
so
they're
they
not
they
saddled with Subban either. Like they're in a very different situation this season than they were.
yeah, they traded Ty Smith. They got John Marino, which I think was a pretty good trade for them. They traded Ty Smith to the Penguins, but I think they'll be pretty good. And I don't know if Simone Nemec, the second overall pick, is going to make the NHL out of camp. He may or may not, but he was second overall pick. Those are typically good players. So
They're just
I
a
think that they're
young,
I
they're just a
think
young
they
team.
yeah, no, they're a young team. Their average age at forward is 25. The average age on defense is 26. And they got Vanacek from Washington. So they're rolling with a tandem of Blackwood and Vanacek. And
I
again,
think that's a
average age
much
there is
better.
25.
I think that's a significantly better. That's going to push Blackwood a little bit. I think that was a good. I think that was a good move for a few years
Yeah.
for them. Um, he's Vanacek's got time in the division. I think he understands, like, so he's familiar with that. I think that's a good add on a couple of levels. I mean, he hasn't had like a ton of success, but he started a lot of games and he's nothing if not consistent over the last 2 years. So,
Yeah,
um,
he's not excellent. He's good. They have a tandem there of they're gonna roll with whoever's winning, right? And then the first loss, okay, switch. And that's the way it's gonna roll in New Jersey. I think they'll be good. I don't think they'll be better than the Islanders. I think it's gonna be, Carolina up top, Rangers, Pittsburgh, Islanders, everyone else.
I can I can reflect that. I can respect that. I think that's fine. So I think the Islanders ultimately fit in pretty well there, where they can control their own future. They just have to beat. They're a big problem with them. Even the last 2 seasons is that they struggled beating the good teams. They managed to do it in the playoffs, and I guess in the short season, the 56 game season, they did manage to figure that out. Going into this year, they beat the Bruins a bunch. That was like the main difference in that season. Um, Other than that, they beat everybody else that wasn't in the playoffs because they were playing just in that division. They need to do a better job of beating good teams in and out of the division throughout the league. That's that's my big takeaway for them, and that's where they need to actually. We're doing a little bit more of a season preview here than I thought we would, but that's kind of where their their focus needs to be. They need to come and take care of business when it's whomever. Carol,
Yeah, no,
the Coyotes
agree.
or whatever, or Buffalo, they need to beat those teams, but they also need to make sure that they're stealing points when they can. When it's teams out of the division, they just can't be losing games straight up. That was even a big, that could have been part of Varlamov's thing too, and just his and quote bad record. Yeah, I mean, if the team was scoring and they're at least going tied through regulation, maybe he could have went 10, 12, and 7, and then you have 7 more points. It's a little bit better. You're in a little bit different position. Um, the second half of their season last year was just so bad. Like in terms of they got better somehow, even though the schedule was condensed, even though they didn't have more than a day off, they couldn't practice. They still managed to kind of get through it. I think that's something, right? I think
Yeah,
that was
I think
something
those are
last night
all
too.
huge factors,
Yeah,
huge factors. And again, I'm all for they didn't get better in adding, but there are a ton of other factors that contribute to their lack of success last season. And moving forward, I don't anticipate those things being that way anymore, right? I
right.
don't think there's going to be long stretches of games where there's COVID cases. I don't think there's going to be, uh, you know, I can't. You
Fingers
can't talk about
crossed on that.
the injuries, right? Fingers crossed on that. But injuries. We'll see what happens there. That you can't control. But they're not going to be forced to play with an AHL roster like they were for
Oh
4 or 5
yeah, for a
games
month.
last season.
Yeah.
So that's there's definite factors there. They're not going to be on the road to start 13 games. And I understand they went 5-2-2 in the first 9 and everything, but still, like they played like once a week. It was horrible. It was horrible. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of factors here. Add the fact that they have had one of the longest summers in like the past 3 years to recoup and refresh. I think they'll still be a good team. This episode is brought to you by DraftKings. College football is back. It's time to enjoy the tradition, the fun, and the great offers from DraftKings Sportsbook. To celebrate the best time of the year right now, new customers can bet just $5 on any team and get $200 in free bets instantly, win or lose. If that's not enough action, you can also place a same-game parlay for a shot at an even bigger payout. Just combine multiple bets into one, like which team will get the win, which team will score first, and more. DraftKings is safe, secure, and reliable. Best of all, you can deposit and withdraw your cash whenever you want. So download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, use promo code THPN, bet just $5 on college football, and get $200 in free bets instantly. That's code THPN only at DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 years and older in most eligible states, but ages vary by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for terms and resources. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In Tennessee, call or text the Tennessee Red Line at 1-800-889-9789. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. One per customer, minimum $5 deposit and wager, $200 issued as 8 $25 free bets.
Thinking about one of the biggest factors in the upcoming season and what that could be, I think Lane Lambert offers an opportunity for them to really change. I think
Yeah.
I'd written about that some time ago where they need to reinvent themselves a little bit under Lambert. They need to shift some of that focus away from defense. Although Lamoriello kind of doubled down on that too by saying he's a goal differential guy, which didn't really line up considering the last few years, and maybe he doesn't know his numbers. He's only looking at the wins and when it was successful, which is I think the definition of cherry picking. But one of the big things is going to be Lambert. How can he make even these slight changes to the roster? How can he make slight changes to how they actually play to make them better? I think I did see,
Yeah.
and I wanted to bring it up to you to see. I think I know the answer. You kind of answered it already, but I'll ask anyway. Do you think he's being set up for success, or do you think if the team
Wow.
doesn't do well, it's your people are going to be quick to point the finger simply because he's not Barry Trotz? I think he's going to suffer from that a little bit if they struggle at any point for a stretch, which they're bound to lose 5 games in a row at some point. He's almost set up to be, well, that's it. Barry Trotz is gone. They can't hold it together, which is interesting consider if you look back at some of their records. They fell apart second half of the season. In the 2 years they made it to the final, the conference final, they had rough stretches, and they still managed to make it. So what do you think about some of that?
I don't think that. I think some people might say that, but I think if they go on that 5 game losing streak that you just mentioned, but which by the way, let's hope that that doesn't happen. Um, I think a lot of the blame is going to go to Lamorello, just because it'll be you didn't equip the team with what was necessary, and that applies to Lane Lambert too. You're betting on a brand new coach going with the same roster that he had that didn't succeed last season by not adding any punch up front in terms of firepower. That's a big bet. You would think that with a new coach coming in and the same aspirations to make the playoffs and return to that Eastern Conference, um, and further that you were in the 2 seasons prior, you would think that you would have added some punch. You would think that you would have added somebody who would make a major impact to play with your best player in Mathew Barzal. It's
I
it's
Yeah, I
tough that
again we
that
don't
didn't
know.
happen. It's
I
tough that that
still
didn't
that's
happen. I think that regardless, I think there was a reason why he was so highly sought after, meaning Lambert. A lot of teams wanted to talk to him. A lot of interviews were lined up. Had already been on a few interviews in the past. The Islanders were nervous to lose him, um, which I think says a little bit as well. They fired their future Hall of Fame coach, which I think says a little bit as well. Was it a mistake?
That
To be
says a lot of it.
determined. To be determined. But I think there's a lot going for Lambert on his end, but I don't feel that the blame should be his if things don't go well, especially out of the gate.
Yeah, I do think I think like I said, I just don't want him to suffer from not Barry Trotz syndrome. Like looking at the roster and be like, well, you should have been able to do something and kind of just getting even half the blame. Right. It's Lamoriello's roster. Whatever Lambert's being handed. And I think that comment is not necessarily a comment on what Lambert's capable of so much as what is he being. It's like if Trotz came in and he didn't do anything, but anyone would have blamed him for that. I think no, I think people would have looked at that roster and went, yeah, it wasn't really that good on paper. I don't really know what you expected. He got blood from a stone on that roster. The question is Lambert also capable of that? And I think even more importantly, can the players step up? I think this is just as much on the players. If you want to split up the who's responsible for what at a certain point, Lamoriello did his thing. The players like being on a team with each other, so they're not going to blame their GM for not getting better. The thought that Barzal wouldn't appreciate somebody not coming in, like I really don't know that that's the case or not. So the players need to step up. Bavillier better be happy for 1 second that he didn't get booted and say, I finally need to step up here. I finally need to be that 25 goal scorer. Wallstrom too had crazy moments last season where he was really good and had crazy moments where he literally turned around and punched somebody. Like he needs to get his emotions in check. And I mean, obviously not at the professional level, but I remember coaches telling me like when you play angry, you're not playing well. Your focus is just not where it needs to be. You're not the type of player that can play angry. You need to focus, to play your game, do your thing. That's the conversation that needs to happen with Wallstrom. As soon as you started getting too angry, as good as throwing his weight around, I think this like angsty Islander fan thing, we all kind of love that. Him and like Subban, I think, got into it a little bit. It just gets away from his game. Do your thing. Shoot the puck. Play north-south. Nothing fancy. That's just not what needs to happen at this point. So as
Yeah,
long as everybody can kind of do that, I think they're in good shape.
I think the other thing with Lambert too, and that maybe this is part of the reason why he's the head man in charge right now. He has a history of working with the prospects or the young guys, if you will. When he was with Washington, he was a big part of Evgeny Kuznetsov's development. Um, Tom Wilson when he was younger, who people forget. I know he's made some questionable decisions. He's a good player though. He's a
That's
very
very
good
generous.
player.
He's
Well,
good on your team. He's good.
he's a good
Yeah,
player.
there's
He's
there's parts of
he's
his game
a
that take away from the good parts of his game.
he's a very he's a taller Brad Marchand light, very light, you know,
I mean, even
and
Marchand's better than him on offense, like by
no,
a
I
super
agree.
long
That's why
shot.
he's light, and I'm saying like he scored 20 goals. He's scored 20 goals before. He's had like 50 points, and he's a player who will he'll bang bodies. He wasn't that player when he was drafted, so that I think part of
Sure.
the thing with Lambert is he's had history with working with and developing the younger guys and giving them a chance to work it out in the games and I think that's a big benefit, right? Because we saw with Trotz and I'm no Hall of Fame coach and I'm no one to question him, but we did see him, sit guys for a whole game the next game for one mistake. They could have did 12 things right, but one mistake they sat the next game. We've seen healthy scratches, we've seen benching, we've seen, the quote unquote tough love that we've heard about, which is fine if the players are responding to it, but things did not change for Wallstrom most of the last season. In fact, they got worse. Um, and I think that Lambert, he's a different person, different personality. We heard the cliche when it happened. He's new voice. That is, you know, part of the reason why this happened. He has a different way of doing things. Now, does that mean the defensive structure is not going to be in place that Trotz implemented? I think that'll still be part of the Islander system, but he has a different method of getting through to these players,
I
and
think that's
especially
part
the
of it.
young ones.
I think there's also rebalancing a little bit. I don't think anything gets taken away necessarily from the defense, but that you need to be able to turn it into offense.
Right.
Trotz did a really good job of making sure that the defense was the defense, and it definitely helped. But the Islanders are at their best, and they've really been this way for a long time. I think Trotz and Lamoriello really honed something I'd written a million years ago about how the DNA of this team was forged in 2013 in that playoff series, a shortened year for a different reason in 2013, but nonetheless, they made the playoffs and the way that they were in that series and really subsequently after that, it was this energizer bunny beehive type of offense where it was just energy. It wasn't a lot of skill, but when they really got on it, they were at their best. And when they've won playoff series, it wasn't this super methodical doing one thing, and they needed the help on defense, but they need to add that back. That's what they really lacked in the Trotz era is that energy. They did it against the Pittsburgh Penguins in 2018, and when they swept them, when they were all over that team, they suffocated the Penguins. They never had a shot. Shift after shift, the Penguins never had a shot in that series. That was that was one of the only times. The other times it was more of a grind. Philadelphia, Boston, Washington. It was a different. Oh, and they really did clean up Washington pretty good in the bubble. So that's probably another example. But it's just not consistent enough. They can get that energy back if Lambert can reinvigorate some of that and by turning the defense into offense and having that same kind of energy in the offensive zone that they've had before where they found success. I think that can really help turn things around a little bit. It's going to be a little harder when your
Yeah.
roster's a bit older at this point.
Well, I'll
Um,
say this, and this is less a compliment to Lamorello and more an ode to who Alexander Romanov is. He's that kind of guy. He's going to bring that kind of electricity on the ice. He's going to hit people. They're going to be big hits. They're going to be exciting hits. They're not going to be dirty hits. Let's just address that, hopefully. Um,
yeah, God,
but
that'll be yeah.
he
Clip
has
that.
he's got that snarl in his game, and I think that's you know I don't want to say that's the reason they got him, but that being inserted into this lineup where last season it was kind of missing from Martin and Sezikis mostly. I think Clutterbuck was mostly himself still, um, but I think Romanov brings that electricity that the Islanders have had in the past. So I do think we'll see that return, not just from him. Obviously, I think we're going to see a bounce back from Sezikis as well. We'll see what we get in Martin, and I think Clutterbuck is going to be himself still. But Romanov definitely brings that.
I think too, and it's something just to make sure that we're not overlooking someone like Robin Salo being inserted into this group on defense. That they've three, let's call them tough defenders, real like big bodies who are just going to go out there and that's their job on that pair. And with the addition of Salo, really kind of adding, you have Pulak, Dobson, and Salo bringing more of that offensive game. So that's a that's balance on D to begin with. And those pairings, should that actually shake out, I think there's some question about if Romanov and Dobson will be paired together. And I think that's fair. I just don't know what then how that works necessarily. I could see maybe like Romanov Salo is not a pair, and that's really the only other option. Like it's not gonna be Romanov, it's not gonna be Salo Dobson, it's not gonna be Romanov
Well,
Mayfield. So it's like
there's
I'm not
there's
exactly
been the
sure.
idea floated out there. I think think Hers said this. I think he alluded to the fact that we do assume Romanov and Dobson will be together, but there is the outside possibility it'll be Pellick, Dobson, Romanov, Pullock.
I would personally, I mean, I can understand like playing with it. It's the off season.
Sure.
Thinking about it, like if it was going to start tomorrow, that first pair has got to be that first pair. I'd be
No, I
willing
agree
to
with you.
bet. I'd be willing to bet more on the other two being okay and them being themselves on the first pair,
Yeah.
and then making the adjustment after. Like I wouldn't start and then be like, "Oops." I'd rather make the adjustment from something that works and found out it didn't than not have any of this game tested.
No, I agree with you, and it makes a ton of sense too because they got the same term on their contract. They're both 22 years old, and I don't know if you saw my tweet the other day, but they have literally almost
The
the
same
exact same
birthday.
birthday. Dobson is born, I think, on the 7th of January, and Romanov on the 6th in the same year. So they are, I think, going to just grow and develop together as a pair, and there's a possibility that this could be a very good one. So
Yeah, but like I said, I think regardless, it's balanced. And I think that's
yeah,
where you need to like to kind of look at those
for sure.
types of things where it's gonna be Pulak Mayfield. It's gonna be Romanov Pellick. Or maybe not Romanov Pellick. I think that's where it's confusing. Salo
Romanov,
Pellick,
Pollock.
Romanov Pulak. I guess. Yeah, I guess so. Um it's confusing that way. Like a part of me is go out there and play well. Like when the game's going on, I'm like, I can't believe this pair is out there. Like unless they're playing really, really bad, and you're like, what's the X factor here? Oh, they're two righties and they can't get the puck out. Or you know what I mean? Like I'm not dissecting it in the moment. I'm kind of looking afterwards and trying to look at the stats and especially if they lose, trying to look at the stats and what's working over time, especially not just a 30-second shift or 2 30-second shifts where they got scored on both times. It just happened to be on the ice together. And that was the only minutes they played. It's like, yeah, that's not a pair. I wouldn't look at that over time. I think it's just avoiding making sure the line changes are good. But in any event, like I said, like I've said a couple times now, I think it's just a balance. How do you balance those defensive pairs? How do you balance the offense and the defense on the whole? So Lambert has his work cut out for him. I don't I hope he doesn't suffer from not Barry Trotz syndrome. Um
Yeah,
and I hope the players that are there can just step up and be who Lamoriello says they are, who they say they are themselves. And who a lot of fans, I think there's still a good chunk of fans are saying, good, Kadri didn't come. Let's actually run this back in a way where everyone's healthy and see what actually happens. Then evaluate. Last year, that's tough. And I largely agree with that. We're it's easy to be like, they weren't good on paper. They didn't improve in the offseason. They had all these bad things happen to them. And they weren't like overall and their record wasn't good. I think it's easy to do that, and it's not necessarily wrong. It's just how you weight it. If you can get through this year fully healthy, COVID and otherwise, and then they're not good. And if by end of November, early December, they're hardly pushing for even a wild card spot, I think then it's safe to kind of call it and be like, "Yep, this isn't going to end well." However, this season ends, maybe we finally do see some big changes. Um, Again, not even worth speculating on what that might be because you thought that would happen after last season. So I don't know what it's going to take for there to be a change like that. Um, but I'm willing to go kind of month by month here to evaluate what's going on.
yeah. I think that's well said, and again, I think it all has to do with how the blue line was formed last season. Goaltending is going to be the goaltending. We know that's going to be good. Sorokin's going to be, I think, top 3 in the league this season. A lot of smoke around that, with other outlets too. I think you're right in the sense that Varlamov will reverse his season last season. He won't be the starter. He might be the 1B, but if he gives you a good 25, 30 games, who knows, maybe there's a 50-50 split.
I think he's
We
in
know that
the
that's going to be
no, sorry. I think
the
he's in the 28 to 32 range game wise,
yeah,
maybe
which is
35.
and if he wins you 20 of those, great.
Yeah, and that was our question the whole time. You trade Varlamov. Who is a goaltender that's going to win you
Yeah.
15 to 20 games?
Yeah. The question becomes the offense, who's going to score goals, but I think it all has to do this summer was all about fixing the blue line because again, they lost
That's what I mean.
Letty
That's what happened.
and yeah, that's what happened, but I think that was if there was a list, number 1. They lost Letty, they lost Tays, they saw the aftermath, which was 2021-22. I think that they believe now because they have Romanov and whoever wins that 6th spot, Salo, Aho, Chalowski, X, whoever, I think they firmly believe that the play will now be directed in a better system with the guys they have now. Not a better
I
system. I shouldn't say better system. I think the system will be better because of the personnel they have now.
I think that's right, and I think on the offense, and I want to get your opinion on this too. Well, rather, I'll ask you the question: is Matt Barzal the biggest X factor on the offense going into this next season?
Yeah. You know, it's hard to say because you look at his last season, 59 points, he didn't even break 60, disappointment. I understand that, but I also look at who did he play with? Nobody consistently. He lost his most consistent line mate who he had the most chemistry with when he was plucked to go to Seattle. So who is he playing with? And that's the problem. I don't know if anybody on this team right now has, and this is a compliment to Barzell. I don't know if anybody has the same hockey IQ as this guy. He's so far on the next level from everyone else. And does he make mistakes? Sure. Is he a perfect player? No. But he is so far ahead everyone else in the hockey IQ and creativity sense that it's hard to keep up with him. Anders Lee was an excellent line mate for him when he had Jordan Eberle on the other side. But now I like him with Nelson because their pace is similar. They can keep up with each
Yes,
other. It's
that's right.
hard for Lee to keep up with Barzell now because nobody else is keeping up with him on the right side. So you have to figure out what that's going to look like. And so I
If
guess
you can,
that
if
does I guess yes, I'm talking myself into yes, he is the X factor because if he's put in the right position, he's going to explode.
yeah,
It's a contract season. He wants to get paid. I understand what he said, and I'm a firm believer that he wants to stay, but he wants to get signed long term. There's going to be money to come with that. He's going to want at least 8 million. I could see more. So I think he's going to explode this season if he's put in the right position, and if he does, that is only another reason why the Islanders can take that step forward or that step back forward where they were. They took a step back last year. They can put their feet in the footprints where they were 2 seasons ago.
yeah. I think Barzal has the opportunity to really. He's the stir. He's the straw that stirs the drink.
Yeah.
They go as he goes. So if he can really explode, like you said, I think that the team ultimately follows suit. I want to throw some lines at you because now that this is it. Like
Okay.
now you're starting to tinker. This is we're in full preseason mode. Although we might take some weeks off here and there ahead of that because now really nothing's going to be happening from here on out. But um, 18. I'll go with the numbers. If you're listening to the show, maybe we'll put the line up in the description with the player names. But I wrote it down. Oh, I'll just say them: Bavilier, Barzell, Wallstrom, Lee, Nelson, Bailey, Parise,
Mm.
Pajot, Palmieri, fourth line.
I think I'm changing that first line as much as I want Wallstrom with Barzell. I I I have concerns about the defense with that first line. And I understand the first line's
Interesting.
not meant to play in their
That
own end, but
what's really funny is this is a reversal a 12-month later, it is a
Yeah,
180 away from, and it's
yeah,
I did that simply because he's a scorer, put him on the first line, just like let it go. Let it
yeah.
ride. Because I was in your shoes, be like, oh yeah, no way, he's not ready to be on the first line. Like I don't know.
Well, if it
Palmieri's
was,
what you've been there before.
let's say for instance, it was on the left, it was Anders Lee, for instance. I would put Wallstrom there, but I don't think I think because Beauvillier is on that line, they're as a whole not that great defensively. Now, I also do understand that the point of the first line is to not play in your own end that much. Maybe
Sure.
that works. I think if anybody's going to start the season on the first line, if it's not Wallstrom, because I do think there's a chance it could be Wallstrom. We'll see what happens. I don't know anymore if Palmieri is out of the top six. I think he could play first line. If you're rolling out Palmieri, Barzell, Beauvillier, with Beauvillier on the left and Palmieri on the right, I just reversed it. I think I like that. You have two guys who can skate circles around the opponent. All Palmieri has to do is just get open and take the shot. And traditionally, for the first however many years of his career, besides last season, he was pretty good at putting the puck in the net. So, and then he figured it out eventually. So, Palmieri doesn't have to do anything except shoot.
I
I
think that's
think that that
mostly right.
works.
I think that's mostly right with the caveat that Pajot and Palmieri played really well together. Do you
That's
break that
true.
up?
That's true. I think I think just because of where he is now, I think Bailey's got to be on that third line with Parise and Pajot. That's your
Well,
veteran
I've
third line, and I think
uh,
Wallstrom sits on the second line with Lee and Nelson. Lee and Nelson are very good in all three zones. I think
it's
Wallstrom benefits
possible.
from that.
Yeah, it's possible that Walsham and Bailey just flip. So 18,
Wallstrom on
13,
the third
12.
line.
No, 18, 13, 12, 27, 29, 26. So that second
Yeah,
line is with Wallstrom, and I do like Pajot Palmieri together with talk about
I do
a
too.
veteran third line with Parise. I really really like that. That's an opportunity for Palmieri to really line him up. He's going to get weak competition. He's got somebody down the middle that can skate with him and have some speed. Flanking him is somebody else with a ton of speed. They can really rack it up and get those secondary points for the Islanders to really push them over the edge. I think
I
you're
just
tinkering with 18, 26, and 12 on the first two lines. And, it wouldn't surprise me if it's Bailey, Barzell, Wallstrom, Lee Nelson, Beauvillier, which also worked for a stretch last season, and kind of just go from there.
if you're putting Bailey on the left with Wallstrom on the right, I think that could work too.
That's yeah. I'm putting that score with somebody more defensive minded that the team trusts. I, I
Don't love
I
it.
would just prefer. I don't love it. I would prefer the speed. I would prefer just look. The first line is just straight youth, and you talk about does Bavillier think the game like Barzell? No, but he can at least catch up to him physically as far as the
Yeah, that's
speed
the
is
thing.
concerned. And if Walsham can just find his spots, I think that that's okay. So it's just a
Right.
matter of you know I don't know that you mess around with the bottom six all that much, frankly.
Yeah,
But
it
it's that
depends.
top six you're just rearranging, and three of those players are firm in pretty much firm in where they are. So
I
you're
think training
just
camp's
talking
gonna be
about
telling. Training camp's gonna be
I
telling
don't
because
know,
they're gonna
maybe late. In the beginning,
well,
it's going to be
I
a
was gonna
shit
say
show.
they're gonna tinker in the beginning with the lines, but then as the days progress, you're gonna start to see more and more of the consistency there, and it's really just gonna depend on what clicks, right? Because if you put Bailey on that first line with Beauvillier and Barzell, I know we said something else after. I'm just this is what came to my head when I heard it.
Yeah,
Nobody's taking the initiative on that line to shoot. Maybe Beauvillier, but those are all relatively passers,
but that's going to be
playmakers.
I think that's to me for Lambert to get it into these players' heads. Shoot the
You're
puck.
right. Yeah, no, you're right. But I feel like
It's not
we're
their
in a
instinct.
world right I feel like we're in a world right now where Palmieri is going to be in the top six. I agree with you. I do like him with Pajot. I just think that he's got the speed. of anybody on that right side, if Wallstrom's not ready, I think Paul Mary's next up because I think he has that speed to keep up, and
W-
he's
Yeah,
he's been there, done that. He's scored the goals, so
yeah.
that's why I
We're having
think
the
you'd be
same
that.
we're having the same conversation we did last year, essentially, and with like our roles reversed a little bit. At
Yeah,
this point, I'm like, screw it, just put him up there. I'm not
I'm
worried
with
about
you.
being careful. Last year, I was worried about being careful. Look how far they got. Let's make sure that we're calculated. I'm over that. Put the puck in
I'm
the net.
I'm
If you
I'm
didn't
with
have a
you
first
there.
line guy, you didn't get Goudreau. You know who's a really young player that can shoot the puck really well. Wallstrom, done. That's your new first line
I'm
guy, and go for it. Like just lean into it. If you're gonna double down,
Yeah.
go double on top of that. Just own
I'm with you
this is
there,
your
and I'm
roster,
I'm I'm saying that he's not good defensively, assuming that he'll be more of the same from last season.
which is probably not
I'm
too off base.
maybe, but there's also the sheer possibility that he's going into year 3. Look what, and I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but look what Dobson did in his year 3. Maybe Wallstrom's going to take that step. Maybe he'll be fine defensively. Maybe he'll be able to score 20 goals. Maybe he could be a first line guy or at least a top 6 guy. I'm not I'm not
That's
putting that
possible.
out of the question.
I think
But if
you're
if what
probably
I-
right.
if what we saw last season is what's coming to camp, then I don't think Wallstrom could be on the first line. If things change in camp and he's like this is a better player, I don't want to say a different player, but a better player, then sure.
I'm here for that because that was the argument that I had. That Walsham's going to get weaker. Same argument that I had for Palmieri Peugeot to be on that third line as secondary scoring, like true secondary scoring. Wallstrom has an opportunity to play lesser competition on that first line. He's playing next to Barzal. He's gonna get a lot of attention. That's an opportunity for some players, but maybe it's better for a veteran. I can easily convince myself of that to be Palmieri. I think I'm just trying to go with what works. You had a bunch
Yeah,
of
no, I hear
pairs
you.
that worked. You had two pairs that worked really well last season. Try to keep them together the best that you can, and shift everything else. Um, that we're probably belaboring this a little too early and well before camp. Um, Now, truly, we started the last episode, dog days of summer. It is really here after now. Really, nothing is going to happen unless something very strange happens around the beginning of the season with the waiver wire. Um, I suspect we're probably on the right track with just rearranging the current deck chairs, save for
Yeah,
Romanov and Sallow. Um,
yeah.
but there'll be time for that later on. So I think it's time to pull the plug on the episode here. What do you think?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. Um, Please rate, review, subscribe wherever you listen or watch the show. Love the YouTube subscribers keep going up. YouTube views keep going up. Super cool.
Loving
I'm
that,
glad that people are here. They want to see our faces,
which
which
is
is interesting
crazy to me.
because our
My hair
voices aren't
today.
great. So like looking at us too, you're just talking about double down. You're yikes. I'm not sure. There's a judgment call there, so maybe
You
consider
guys are
abstaining.
lucky my wife makes me make the bed.
Right? Yeah, me too. This is like my home. I live my whole life at this desk, so you're seeing like what my my colleagues see all day when I'm in meetings, which is my bed. And there's something a little weird about that. A lot of people seeing the old bedroom. Uh, Eventually, I'll get a house and an office, but we'll see. I did slight tangent near the end here. I did put an offer on a house today. It was denied like immediately. So that was fun.
Oh,
I had a
that's
roller
always fun.
coaster of an evening. Yeah, I loved that. Very nervous. I like kind of freaked out a little bit only to hear like 2 hours later that people had like bid crazy numbers on the house, which is
Oh,
probably
I was gonna
better
say,
that
yeah.
I
I've
didn't.
been outbid by 6 digits before, so
Yeah,
fun
I'm
world we
not
live in right now.
mine was it was only in like the tens of thousands, but that's still a lot of money that I don't have, so that's a reason why I wasn't the person overpaying for it, but,
Yeah.
um,
Sorry they laughed at
that
your
was
offer,
fun.
buddy.
I don't know if it was laughed. whatever. But one day, anyway, I'll have an office, and you can. It'll be nice. My mom watches the show sometimes, and she
Oh,
says you need So hi mom, but if you're listening, she's like, oh, you need like an Islander banner in the background, like your co-host. I was like, yeah, one day. I just like don't. Where am I going to put it? But,
well, I don't have one anymore now, so
anyway, yeah, that's what happened.
thank my daughter for that.
Yeah, thanks. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube at Nazem Hockey. Find James' work at the period and at Eyes on Isles. You can find my work at the Hockey Writers. Make sure to subscribe to Isles Fix. We're getting close to the start of the season. They're for sure going to start up their daily newsletters again. And there's major news, so there's always something going on. The team over there will send you something. James, bring us home.
Until next time, everybody. Let's go Islanders.